What's up, my fellow Universians? This is being recorded the night before the Atlanta Regional starts. I won't be there until like midnight Saturday morning. So I'm going to miss out on day one activities, but I'm getting ready, getting my stuff packed up, trying to finish up a meme edit, which kind of running out of time on, but I figured I wanted to do some kind of upload for sure. And there's a lot to talk about in UniVersus right now. We're pretty deep into the Guilty Gear preview season. I think we're actually almost done. I'm looking on Ultra right now, and there's like what 6 characters up here out of 8. So we're pretty much almost done here. And I was lucky to do Potemkin. I got to do the character I asked for. And the preview season has been kind of up and down. And that combined with the stress of preparing for a regional, because I really, when I found out who was casting Atlanta and who wasn't, I found out that I was going to basically not be working it. I started to look into making it possible to go. And of course, that came down to a lot of extraordinary help from people in the community. Notwithstanding, all the amazing support from webcam warriors that definitely helped a lot in getting to Atlanta. That was pretty necessary for that to be a success too. And hopefully I've said thank you enough to all the people who supported that and sponsored it. But yeah, that was definitely the biggest event yet. Absolutely incredible stuff from so many people in the community. And I almost feel like I'm obligated. If I can go, I have to go. I have to participate. I gotta participate. And typically for tournaments, I spend a lot of time stressing, trying to figure out the cool new angle in the format. I want to be that guy with the spicy, pet deck that has the right angle for the format. And truly, I don't know how many of those we've actually seen win tournaments. We used to have a lot less tournaments with a lot less turnout. And so it would make a lot more sense when you get like the odds and ends winners of PTCs in the past. But even then, I bet that was probably way more rare than we remember. And we were just goo goo gagaing over what made top 8 in a diversity field. So, it's always been cool to be recognized, to have something different, but then at the last minute, I'm not a great deck builder, not the most ingenious meta man. And I usually just pivot to something that is really consistent. And so my prep for this event looked very similar. I was looking at angles for Deku at first, and I'll be honest, I just really, as much as I stand up for the one shot gameplay, game style, however you want to put it, game plan, and I do think that this version that the deck is currently under is not quite as toxic as the good version was actually, which is weird because I feel like it's certainly had more success, or at least a lot more people hyping it up than like the good versions that were at Worlds. But I feel like it lost like more cancels, more hand traps, things like that. So I was really upset that like the version of the deck that most people kind of wrote off as being a little too gimmicky was the one that seemed to have every single thing covered. It had every single angle. It could cancel responses. It could cancel actions. It could cancel enhances, by flashing the attack. So that version seemed really toxic, and the version that just draws more cards didn't seem that much more toxic to me. But the idea of trying to play it in a tournament setting, and especially seeing like the way that decks have basically adapted to try and beat Deku's, seeing like the Porcos get refined, Porco deck. I think won the last 2 major community events, webcam events. I know that Gavin Kill's done really good with that deck a lot. A lot of people are believing in it. It gets some sweet moves. It has the right symbols, and so I kind of made a personal decision not to play the Deku deck, even though I'm really stoked for the air symbol. But it a lot like the Rodan deck, you just get pulled in so many directions. And one thing I've really valued right now is the ability to punish aggro decks. You know, I think we saw in Canada when you give those decks many, many turns to keep, you know, finding the hand, basically keep sculpting the hand, and the volume that you have to account for. You know, the shift from the good symbol and from like other symbols, the void symbol, over to the air symbol was to kind of fix the card draw problem. That is a big place where, you know, the Deku deck was stumbling all the way back in Denver. I remember I had friends playing the deck and they just were like, I have to play Meeting Hanji, you know, like for whatever symbol they're on, they're like, Hanji's like the only card that's like efficient card draw, stuff like that. So, you know, I fooled around with having like a fairly aggressive version, but a big appeal to me was playing like a low attack count because again, I'm really valuing consistency in my early turn builds. I want to not have non games. And so the other deck I looked at after that was Zeke Yeager. Zeke Yeager has really explosive early turns. You can play it as a pretty low attack count deck. I know that there's basically two versions. I like the Chaos version, which was only Chaos almost by technicality. Like there's so many attuned cards in those decks. But I did prefer the version that was a little heavier on being able to force transformation. Of again, going back to like the I want to punish decks a little bit earlier in the game, you know, willing to take a little bit more extra risk. But in this way, the risk was basically being able to pass checks, which once you transform, you know, with a low attack count deck, that should be fairly easy. And not really taking like the defensive life route where you get to a point where you know you're going to pass these checks. You know, you actually cannot check bad. You're just playing through interaction. And I really liked that deck. I really liked both the Chaos and the Life versions that I tried, but I really like the Chaos version. I love playing Knockdown Blow. I love like the big goofy kind of Titan offense. You know, the 9 Titans offense is like in my head, it's just, you know, big number. It's weak to interaction. You know, it's weak to the answer, which is like a corny thing to say, but it reads like a casual strategy, right? It reads like Big Green Stompy from Magic, and whenever Big Green Stompy is good at Magic, I have no fun, which is why it's really funny that like in UniVersus, you can like build around, you can build foundations around it. You know, sometimes your opponent can just raw block like a 7, 8, 9, 10 speed move, you know, especially like beyond turns 2 and 3. It gets kind of difficult. You know, if you start doubling the speed, it's a lot of investment to only deal 7 damage, right? So I think that the strategy is like in a mental space, it's like in a really casual, you know, kind of goofy spot. But the fact that these decks are like able to play Beast Titans Rock Barrage and have a very viable amount of board interaction turns it into almost like aggro control, you know? And so I like that we have high difficulty stuff. I like that there's, you know, the risk reward is not so much that I have to risk losing the game because I failed the check, but the risk is more, can I get my synergy in line to counteract that downside? And, you know, I think for most people right now, that's just a little too easy. You know, it's a little too simple. Zeke Yeager's check bonus is really good. And so playing cards like Knockdown Blow and stuff like that, turn 2, have just been like super appealing to me. But the Life version has some nice interaction with cards like Incredible Display, but I'm personally really bad at having momentum. I think a lot of people are going to be trying to hate on momentum in their main board. Radiant Visage has been played more and more, not just because decks are looking to self-mill themselves more often. You know, Devil Jins like to fill up that discard pile. Porcos are down to mill. They got all the casino, whatever, bing bong cards, whatever we're calling them now. I call them Yahtzee cards. You know, they've got all that random discard pile stuff. So I'm expecting, you know, momentum hate for cards like Incredible Display. And it didn't feel too right. It didn't feel like I had a lot of agency beyond like being able to pass checks really well. I love being able to play my whole hand. You know, being able to play my whole hand and just draw back up by either sacrificing backups or committing the backups, turning all your foundations into commit draw one. Pretty insane, except they're not really foundations, and that was just a big issue. I could pass that one big check really well, but if I wanted any extension, if I wanted to play around or through answers, it did usually incur some real risk. So I wasn't a huge fan of the answers that deck had, but it was just playing like a solid, tall game plan, and that was really cool. Playing my whole hand was really cool. So I looked at Armin Arlert, Power of the Colossus. I think I said his name right. He is such a cool design overall. You know, you want to talk about early game consistency. You can't brick with him. You get to play something at least. So I really love that idea. That idea is so appealing to me. He's another character that can play out his whole hand. He's another character that once you transform, you know, you play your whole hand. You can then flip a foundation, and then the effect is discard and draw. So you can look at the top card. You're probably always going to draw it if you have no cards in hand. It's pretty rare that you would just leave it there, you know. And so that, you know, the turning all your foundations into flip draw a card is kind of insane and had a lot of appeal. So I started fooling around with that deck. I didn't even put like massive mutant machines and command of the founding titan, I think, is in it. And I got some suggestions for that, but this was like this weekend, you know, if I wanted to reliably get cards together, you know, borrow like the secret rares I don't have, borrow, you know, the whole deck practically from my locals. Actually, I think it ended up being all of them. I think I was looking for rock barrages, but my locals found that too. So, you know, just being able to get this stuff together reliably, I really wanted to nail it down like that weekend. You know, people around me in Vegas weren't going to be free later in the week, so no last minute changes. I needed to get my deck list submitted to the UGN before I get to Atlanta. So like no last minute changes. I had to lock in early, and I think that kind of saved me because I spent a bunch of time on Monday with the Armin deck, and my friend Brett Hellman, who you might have seen featured on the channel with a couple of deck profiles now. He was talking to me, you know, and on the way home, he was like, and granted, you know, it was just locals, right? And I think I went like 2-1 or something. I think I lost to a Godzilla. And he was like, I don't think the deck's doing anything like super unfair. Like, yeah, I'm not impressed by what the Armin deck is doing. And I took that to heart. I wasn't really impressed either. I tried it after that with the massive mute machines and things like that, but it felt like you had to really like hard invest into that and finding the right ratios for cards like Pristine Swordplay, right? Which has order. So like Armin can build it face down as a 2-diff and then unflip it later and, you know, play the Pristine Swordplays. Like the Mutant Machines did not feel good without Pristine Swordplays to kind of go over the top, like crazy bonkers with it. I did reliably get to unflip it, but then I had one less foundation for Armin's transformation. And that's the part I really liked was, you know, playing my whole hand and getting to draw back up and things like that. So it was kind of in a really weird spot. The deck felt like it was crazy good, fair UniVersus. You know, it felt like putting just big damage on a bunch of 3-divs and just hoping you don't have the blocks for my too high for 11. Not a solid game plan, not the craziest game plan. Very good stuff. Like definitely a good deck. Definitely good enough to like win your locals a bunch of times. I heard about versions where you play the wide swinging Titan blow or whatever, the Titan's wide swinging arm blow. I don't know. It's the one that gets +1 damage for like all your face downs. I'd even consider that after I played the deck at locals. I thought about how often I had, you know, nearly deadlockable face downs in that, I think it specifies ready face downs too. You only get +1 damage for the ready face downs, and I still was pretty hard considering it. You know, I had people talking about there's a version where you just use command of the founding titan, the 6-diff, you know, that you're gonna unflip and you just throw that twice and it's for 1,000,000 twice. And I think it's a low zone, so you know, there's a lot of upside to that. But I didn't feel like I had time to get those ratios right. That's been like the hardest part with like Pumat Soul decks. Anytime I try to make an asset deck like Tarion, anytime I try to make a backup deck, the ratios are always like super foreign to me. The Zeke deck felt really good because I was using the blueprint from Caden Caulfield. I think I looked at Broberg, Caden, and Calvin's all at the same time, and I think Broberg's and Caden's were like the same. I think they were pretty similar, at least in ratios. And so I went based off that, and it felt good. It didn't feel too skewed one way or the other. And on the way home, or like right after I got home, Brett Hillman suggested, because I was talking about like I like the Zeke deck more than the Armin deck. And if I play Armin, I get Fire attuned, which has really good answers for stuff in the format. And I even wanted to go so far as to play Armin on Fire, which definitely is weaker symbol overall, but in this format, you get Forcing Surrender. So I was like, how do I make this work? Because I really don't have time left. And Brett was like, well, if you want to play Fire, and you like the Zeke backup Falling Titans gameplay, and you like having like a punishment game, why not play Hanji 1? And it was like a light bulb went off in my head because I had made like a bunch of Hanji 2 decks, because I really like Hanji. I think Hanji is like the best character from Attack on Titan, and it's not close. And the Hanji 2 deck is so appealing to me. I think it's such a crazy character. You talk about playing your whole hand, and then you get to just like commit for -3 damage and just Ray face downs to like keep doing it. You can replace cards that you destroy with cards from your hand. Drawing cards is like very morphic in this deck. And I do think Hanji Zoe Four Eyes is by far one of the best characters, if not the best. It might be the best character actually in Standard. Like pound for pound, like if we had like a simulation to run or something, like again, like the consistency issue where even if you don't build that great turn 1, you can recover from it pretty easily turn 2. The amount of resources you generate, the numbers are good for a 7-hander. The synergies that Hanji gets is crazy. So I ended up building like a Titan version of Hanji 2 that I really thought was super funny. There's no other way to really put it. I didn't put like a lot of the cool unflip sauce in there. So I was trying out like Resurrected Titans, and I was playing Ravages of War, and like Hanji Zoe Four Eyes gets to play Beast Titans Rock Barrage and gets to play Colossus Titans Destructive Power, the 13 damage move. So I was doing, junk like that. I was playing like Beast Titans Rock Barrage, make it not count towards progressive with Onya Capone, stun 3 my opponent, build 1 down with Hanji. If I committed to play the Beast Titans Rock Barrage, I can just ready Hanji. And as long as I can pass a 10 or a 9, if Onya Capone's there, if I can pass a 9, like my opponent is just dead. They're going to sacrifice 1, commit 1, flip whatever's left ready, and you're going to be dealing with like the 7 mid for 29 or whatever it is. So that deck was super funny. It had that same offensive crux of like, yeah, I get hosed by Barrier Shield, but they got to have it. So I thought that game plan was really cool. But so when he mentioned Hanji 1, it was the light bulb moment. And what was cool was what really drew me to it was as soon as he said Hanji 1, I didn't think, oh, you're right, I get to do funny haha backup stuff or get to do the funny haha 9 Titans combo and play Fire. I didn't think about like all the sweaty Fire answers I wanted to play. I wasn't necessarily thinking about Forcing Surrender and my Fist Solve My Problems and Desperate Struggle, which are cards I was desperately trying to jam into some deck for like the 7 days prior to that. As soon as he said that, I thought, I really do like Hanji. I really do like Hanji. I knew that there was great resources from Top Cut deck lists to look at to get the ratios right. I don't think that deck has changed a whole lot. Maybe, to its detriment. But, the Louisville versions were really strong. I think it was Justin Birch was Swiss champ on Hanji Zoe Fire. There was a Hanji Zoe on life that made it pretty far as well. Definitely top 16. I don't know what the final placings were, but I'm pretty sure like Justin Birch was the Swiss champ, so I remember that one. But there was, there was a life version. There was William Anderson, who was playing Hanji on fire as well, who had a different attack lineup and a different style. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, this is sick. This character, has, I mean, it's still just big damage. It's still play big move, big damage. Don't get me wrong, but the way that they achieved that is a slightly different. The sort of game plans, the sort of quote unquote win cons, and the levels of consistency were similar, which I thought was kind of interesting. You've got Justin Birch's version had the Beast Titan, which picks up ranged attacks from the discard pile and, of course, becomes a really big throw. So you can kind of grind out like more controlling decks. But William Anderson's version had the really, really powerful ability to punish decks early with Titan Pile. I was a Titan Pile hater. I was like, why would I give up the guaranteedness, the consistenciness, the forecheckedness of Beast Titan attacks? But in this format, with the addition of Equipment Heist, and Devil Jin decks actually just presenting like 50 damage like it's nothing. 50 damage you can't block, It used to be 50 damage on a 2 low for 4. Now they're 7, 8, 9 speed. So, the earliness of the Titan Pile was appealing to me, but I'm gonna blend the styles together. We're gonna do our avatar, the style bender, our Israel Adesanya impression, and try to make it work. And the thing that I thought, that was also kind of neat was all the decks I was looking at were like 60 card lists, which you really get to sort of be a 59 card list, which is appealing because I do want to see these answers. I used to be Mr. 70 card deck. I used to really embrace the fact that you can not have a maximum in UniVersus. And I really didn't think it mattered too much, but the format being the way it is, being honestly as stressful as it is, so many things hinge on like one singular movement, adjusting to things seems really tough. I think in the past you could sort of wall up, by playing like 2 cards and holding a lot of blocks and actually like forcibly blocking through things up until about Libra, Cowboy Bebop, if you were playing the right characters, you could stop, trying to expand your board and poking and just sort of try to stabilize at least a little bit until your opponent either got bored or you sculpted a better hand, right? So with this sort of format, I'm really not trying to find Driven by Retribution in 70 cards. I'm hard mulliganing 5 foundation hands to build Forcing Surrender in some matchups. So it was really neat to me that nobody else was really playing like a bigger list. I think actually, now that I think about it, I think Justin Birch's was 61, which is funny. He kind of just like counteracted, like the consistency for the extra copy of Filled Without makes a lot of sense too. So, but again, like playing like near the minimum, playing, a deck where I will feasibly draw a 4 of in my deck seemed really, really nice. So that's where I ended up. And it was in that moment, I was like, you know what? I can just choose to not stress about this and not worry about this. And it was kind of weird over the next couple days because it felt like I was just like hard cope. It felt like I was hard cope. I'm just, scared to do bad. I remember there was even a comment made in a Discord. Someone was talking about like really good players won't play the best decks because they're scared they'll do bad. And then people will, I guess, like, I don't remember the quote, but it was basically, you're scared to get judged for doing bad with a good character. But, it's a game of skill and luck. We all know that, things happen, man. And right now, dude, the field is crazy. Like right now, there's so many good players, almost certainly more good UniVersus players than there ever have been, just by virtue of how big the game has gotten. But there's so much more information that gets passed on. There's so much more, UniVersus that just gets talked about. And it's just been really, it's been really just like a different atmosphere ever since I just decided that I'm not going to view this as my last opportunity to qualify for Worlds, because truth be told, I would love to play at Worlds and have the opportunity to win a character card, but that is, the odds of that are just so unlikely. Even if I was a previous winner, like odds on favorites like Kevin Broberg, who've won it multiple times, even in the most recent era, yeah, I don't know if you could say that they're like high odds to win from a 64 person event, higher than anyone else for sure. But again, there's just so many things to consider when it comes to having a run through a tournament. You have to play really well and get really lucky in so many spots. And, I'm going to have the opportunity, fingers crossed, I guess, if Levi's watching this. If UniVersus Games is watching this, I'm really hoping that I'll get the opportunity to cast Worlds. It was kind of brought up before. I don't know how much I can really talk about it, but I'm pretty sure if I don't play at Worlds, I'll get the opportunity to. And I told them, last time I spoke to someone about it, that let me play in Atlanta. I'll give you an official answer after Atlanta. If I get a day 2 invite, I'm pretty I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna play, but if not, I'll almost certainly just be, it would take something really wild. Like I won't say no to if I earn like a day 1 invite and there is just a deck I really love and really feel confident in, you know what I mean? Like it's so tough, but I'll have to lock in that answer probably before we know exactly what the format will look like for Worlds. And I'm stoked to be a part of it. I'm stoked to be lucky enough, I guess, that even if I don't win, I get to be a part of it, even if I don't get to qualify and play there, that I get to be a part of it. So I've had fun at every Worlds I've casted before. They're always the highlight of the year. I can't believe we're coming up on it again. Honestly, it feels like it was only a couple months ago that we were celebrating Worlds at the beginning of this year. And I had just done like the first webcam warriors, and we're kind of almost all the way through the year. So it's been kind of a trip. I went through the very same cycles I normally do for almost every tournament. Almost every tournament, I managed to do well enough to top, and then I immediately lose anyways. So like that, like that was another thing too. Was like this was the tournament where it really like I don't even think getting second would matter for me because I don't know how many local championships points I can still earn, right? But like if I don't remember where the cutoff is. I don't have it. I had it in front of me and I closed the window by accident, but I don't know what placing I could get that could actually earn me a day 2 invite. I think it's winning. I think I'd have to win the regional to actually get that many points anyways. And so like getting top 8 and then immediately losing or top 16, like probably is the same as not topping. And I thought about that and I was like, at that point, I'm just taking points away from other potential contenders. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to ruin someone's chance to qualify, when I'm on like the longest Hail Mary shot possible. And so that just made it really easy to come to terms. Again, it feels, or at least like the last 40 hours felt like a lot of copium, but I'm just making the conscious decision to not care if I do bad. Because the likelihood is I probably will do bad. I'm very out of practice. I'm playing less UniVersus probably than ever in the last 5 years, I actually played more UniVersus during COVID than like the years before that because online play really, really helped the game out and grow. It made the communities a lot tighter knit. It inspired me to, I think I'd gone onto Discord like the year before, like 2019. I think if you look back, but I wasn't like super active. I didn't know who anyone was. I was actually kind of scared to engage with people because I feel like, a lot of these are people I've met and rubbed elbows with and talked to, but I'm terrible at remembering names. I don't know why I can't remember people's names. I see their faces and I'm like, hey, there's that guy, and like, especially like card games, you're like, oh, that's the Guts Man guy. You know, oh, there's that guy who plays Felicia, but on the water symbol, you know, so it was a lot of stuff like that for me for the first year or so. But when we had online play and stuff like that, it kicked it into overdrive, and some other life events. I think really like around that time, like pinned me to the UniVersus community for life, and so it's just been a real trip to look back at it and go, why did I really stress that bad? You know, like why going into it, you know, I don't think stressing about it is gonna change the way I play too much. And every event I go to, no matter how hard or how lazy I prepare, you know, if I wake up the morning of and decide to play in an event and just grab a deck from someone else. I did that with Tokoyami. I was like supposed to play Asui, and then I played Tokoyami because we were missing rescue completed. This was early. I don't remember, but I was like, all right, man, just hand me Tokoyami. Um, and so I just jammed that, like having not played the character ever before in an online provisional, you know, and got day 2 and then immediately lost to Dan Nelson. So it's whatever. Or was it? No, I think I lost him playing Danky, but whatever it was, you know, it's just like the results kind of always end up the same anyways for me. And so if the results are worse this time because I didn't stress and worry, like it's been worth it. These last 48 hours have just been worth it. You know, I've just been focused on playing 2XKO and like trying to learn new fighting, which granted, that's where a lot of my rage and frustration is going. That's like my outlet for that. So maybe that's helping me cope. You know, but I've just been trying to look at other stuff. I've been editing a meme video, which God, I hope is out around the same time that this goes live. I'll probably set it to go live like Saturday morning, you know, see if people watch it at the venue, something like that. But I'm really digging it. It's going to be, you know, another short, sloppy one just to kind of get these things out in a more timely manner. But again, I'm recording this right now just in case, but yeah, it's been super worth it. It's been super worth it just to be like, I'm gonna play Hanji because I think Hanji is cool, and all my favorite scenes in Attack on Titan and like the lore, you know, I don't know, like the lore of the world would be so much cooler if it was told like by Hanji, like experimenting on Titans. You know, they're like the only character who really gets to like choose their fate. You know, I don't think too many people get the same sort of, you know, or I guess it's all the commanders, the commanders of the Survey Corps. You know, you have like the Sasageyo scene and stuff like that. Like people riding to their like super known death is definitely a thing in AOT, but Hanji's is like different because they're not stony faced, you know, like it's a very different vibe. They're like marveling at the Titans. I don't know. I'm like gushing about the manga now. But so definitely a fan of that character, a fan of the gameplay. I love the consistency of starting with a resource in play. You know, it's kind of broken going first. Like genuinely, it's kind of crazy how greedy you can be going first, and the fact that it doesn't matter. Turn 2, it sucks to commit the 9 Titans. You know, going second, it like sucks to commit the backup. You know, but Hanji's stuff is all statics. So you get to commit Hanji as like that extra resource. So it's just like a very like neat little twist on a known archetype. And I think the game has done a pretty good job at that. I could maybe stand for a few more archetypes than like double damage and +5/+5. And we built it from our discard pile. You know, we built this backup from our discard pile and like annihilated your board. There's a lot going on. There's a lot on top of that, but you know, it's cool that like the Zeke deck and the Hanji deck do feel different. Maybe that's an attuned W. I don't think I want to give attuned that much credit here, but you know, I don't know if Zeke, if we were 3 symbol world, I don't know if Zeke would still have fire, so I don't know how much it would matter, but it's just been like really nice to think about the game, I guess, in like a more, it helped. Okay, let me also say it helps that Hanji is really good. It helps that the deck is really strong. I don't know. It feels like an old format deck though. It feels like it's like a format too late for Hanji. Like, but again, I'm playing it like kind of for the fire symbol for the current matchups in the format. But we'll see. Either way, I've been to so many events in the last few years where I'm not a competitor, and I have so much fun. And the stress of not playing was so obvious to me in Denver when I went to Denver and I didn't get to play. And, I was like by myself for like the first hour, no one's dropped like the first round or whatever. And there's like actually nothing for me to do until side events started up, and I still couldn't do the first couple side events. Like, it was still just awesome to be around people and hang out, So if I do poorly, it'll be awesome to hang out with people, and that's what I'm looking forward to now. I used to think, oh, well, I can just hang out with my friends whenever, and I don't need a tournament to justify doing that, and so I should focus on that, and I gotta get my money's worth out of that, and the answer is that I don't justify that anywhere else. I don't have the ability to just call my friends up and be like, hey man, let's all coordinate plane tickets there, to go to Florida or go to Disney. I don't get the opportunity to do that. And so this is the opportunity. This is the justification I've had to go and see everybody. So I'm going to stop taking that for granted a little bit. But a lot of this is also a big copium, I think, on the future of the game. This is probably like a little clickbaity title, but I think the Guilty Gear preview season has been really up and down for me. Granted, I think a big part of that is we're getting commons and uncommons, and the current design philosophy around those is definitely that the commons are just not as good as they used to be. That's just the only way to put it. The strength is reserved. Now it seems not even really for the ultra rares, but for the secret rares. Those have been absolute bangers. Was it Megalomania is like actually just crazy. Deus Ex Machina probably didn't actually deserve the 2 check, but at the same time, giving a lot of decks access to just wheel your hand is also pretty crazy. So I don't know. But I was pretty sour on Guilty Gear previews at first, and as they've done, more and more previews, I've definitely come around on a lot of them. I think Bridget is just crazy good. Well, not crazy. Okay, so here's the thing. The thing about the Guilty Gear characters are that they're very cool. They do a really cool, good thing, but they play a mini game usually based around damage or the block step. They put the weight of the design for the characters into the current attack, and I think that that's really smart, but it also is something that is just generally weaker. It does inevitably have sort of my rival can just do the opposite thing. Like Bridget's big powerful thing is a twice per turn where the attack has to deal damage. Happy Chaos has a crazy effect, really, if the ranged attack that you remove a bullet counter for deals damage. You get to look at the top of the card, and then you can add that card to your hand or momentum, or you can just leave it there, which is just a crazy, that's just like a crazy level of value. But the fact that it hinges on dealing damage makes him way more fair than like just about any Attack on Titan character, even the Attack on Titan characters that are not good, right? That don't see play, they almost never rely on your opponent doing something. Like the closest ones is like Mikasa has an if you deal damage trigger, which is almost certainly why she doesn't actually get, well, I don't know if that's certainly why, but that's a big part why she doesn't get played, I think, is if you actually put up the blocks, she doesn't draw additional cards and she gets kind of left behind, like by decks like the later 5-hand size Mikasa, who is just going to draw the cards anyways and force the cards to clear with their own effects. So it's things like that where it's really hard to evaluate these characters. Ryu has a response after an attack is completely blocked. You don't know if he'll really get that off on offense, and you can't always get it off on defense either. But he has a design that is, that revolves around the core element of the game that is different is how we attack. Foundations turn sideways to help you play cards. That's a facsimile of, mana and lands and stuff like that. But, up until Flesh and Blood, there really weren't that many games where you play an attack and the opponent specifically gets to interact with it every time. There's games where your opponent plays attacks and you might have like a negate effect card. You would have, the counter spell that counters specific types of events or actions or things like that. Raw Deal is probably the only one I really think of. And they had specific types of reversal. So you play an attack, it has a type instead of a zone, and they have to have a reversal that quote unquote blocks it, and that game hasn't, was dead for like 20 years. Was maybe like 15 until Flesh and Blood, I don't know, something like that. So, that very specific niche of like whether or not I take damage from this, whether or not I can bait a bad block, whether or not my opponent can get a bunch of value. I mean, how many times have you been surprised because you were playing through a turn and you thought, wow, I really thought he would have blocked X, Y, Z if he had a low block because that one lets me draw a card or something like that, And I think the Guilty Gear characters in the theme of tension pretty much all do a really good job of doing that. Bridget says if you deal damage, Happy Chaos is if you deal damage, Kai Kiske is if you deal damage, Potemkin is if you completely block, so he's kind of like the inverse, which makes sense as a 5-hander. He goes his own way. Natural ways to build up the tension through the game's mechanics and through the character designs are really cool in Guilty Gear Strive, and it's just kind of a shame that a lot of people have talked about power creep. I had my own video of power creep talking about basically the instead of focusing on why are we power creeping or what constitutes power creep, my focus is always on how do we come back from it? How do you reset the power level? You see so many people asking for an MHA style reboot, and I don't think that's actually good. I mean, I'd play it, but I'm a lifer, right? Like that they're not. I don't think they're worried about losing me as a consumer. But so you see more and more talks about it. I don't think it's like financially viable. I don't even think it's really like the right time for it. But I think a lot of that really is just the fact that it feels like the 2024 sets and products really stand out. They really kind of, the 3 Attack on Titan sets really stand out. And even like the really strong cards from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in a way, really just stand out. Falling Titans, Equipment Heist. What's the other one? Resurrected Titans. These really... I mean, it's funny because Falling Titans was an old UFS card already that we were like, hey, this is pretty toxic and not cool. And we just got it, but only for less decks. Although I guess, I don't know, Shield Boomerang was kind of only a Cassandra thing too, so I don't know. But yeah, it kind of blows my mind that like that one is just kind of okay now. But these these sets are outliers, and these cards are outliers to the rest of the design, the rest of the game feel, the smell of the game. If we want to be fully corny 45 minutes into this video, which if you're still with me, thank you for listening. But it's not, I don't know, like I can't say it's not UniVersus. That's such a stupid thing to say, but it just doesn't feel great. It really does make it feel like games play out the same way a lot. Part of that might just be the bias from being on commentary, and those are just the games we get on film, a lot of the time. But man, in testing and really like when I was doing like the sweaty grinding all through last week and this weekend, it really felt like everyone's just searching their deck for their win condition, searching through their discard pile. If you're not, your league's behind. Even the Deku decks have usually try to find some way to recur the Phantom Threat, whether it's playing like a female Titan attacks or your Meshi's Perseverance, stuff like that. I think Deku decks are going to transition into Falling Titans decks because they can just be chilling that long and he can play the Infinite. Like they can actually just sit around and sculpt the Infinite. Like, I don't know. Like we've got more Infinites than ever. There's the May Infinite coming out, which, May is different, right? She doesn't have a if you deal damage clause. She's got like a deck building clause, so she's got like a cool little mini game of her own that's not related to the damage step or the block step. So it's I don't know. It's a really mixed bag with Guilty Gear. I think the characters are all sweet. I think they're all actually in a really good. I think they all have powerful effects, but they have a really good condition on dealing damage, which again usually makes things less competitively viable. They're less reliable. But if there was ever a way to gate powerful effects, the number one way is probably dealing damage. It's win more in my head. It's, the way that, I don't know, it feels like it's like the thing I'm already trying to do, right? But that's something we can fight over that every deck is kind of supposed to be prepared for. And so these being like the baselines to kind of gatekeep things like clearing your card pool and getting a momentum at the same time, like seriously, like Bert Holt 1. Remember when we were like the sky is falling about Bert Holt 1? Granted, I guess we were really sky is falling when he wasn't once per turn, but whatever. Still, same idea. Clear your card pool, get a momentum. Pretty insane for a character that doesn't have chaos. Finally an air win on that one, but it's been really interesting to see where the set's gonna go. The ultra rares so far don't look too hot. Blood sucking universe and Potbuster don't look super great, I'll be honest. But Deus Ex Machina and Megalomania are kind of cranked, right? Eno has a mini game too. Eno has a how important is your stage mini game. I think people are kind of, I don't know. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, but to me, when I read Eno, I'm like, your 7-hand set is Mirio with no defense. But I guess the defense is also changing the zone. But I don't know. I'm prepared to have my stage completely sealed and canceled by every Devil Jin ever this weekend. So I'm already, I'm dooming on that, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of these designs that I think people are only poo-pooing them if they compare them to Attack on Titan cards that search your deck and tutor your discard pile and build it for free and ready themselves and, make you cookies and hot chocolate and put the little marshmallows in the hot chocolate, right when it's done to make sure it's nice and melty by the time it gets to you at the couch and you've got your little blankie pulled up so you can watch your cartoons. That's how it feels to play Resurrected Titans, like actually, like Resurrected Titans is the fucking DoorDash of UniVersus, dude. Like you're just like, fuck doing any work. Bring it to me and make it, free to play. Like that's probably the only thing that's not DoorDash about it is that Resurrected Titans also makes it cheap. It's like the new user coupon. But yeah, I don't know. I was pretty sour on a lot of the stuff I've seen from Guilty Gear, but I've been saying, show me the sweeping daggers from this set. Give me, Critical Role's got like a handful of cards that were super meta viable. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has had a handful of cards that are format warping, to say the least. Game changers for sure. And I think, I talk to people who aren't just UniVersus players, and they don't understand why that's weird. They're like, what do you mean? There's a card to chase from this set. You're doing good, you know. And so maybe we've just been a little bit spoiled. Maybe UniVersus players are still not over being spoiled by the idea that all the cards can be good and that, you know, now sometimes designers can just throw some stuff out there. But I don't know. The uncommons still have cool stuff like Behemoth Typhoon. You know, like Behemoth Typhoon is like actually just kind of good enough to play. So that one they might have been trying to play a little safe on. You know, I don't know. But yeah, Behemoth Typhoon's a funny one, and that's an uncommon. So I'll give it up for that one. But yeah, I don't know. I wanted to talk a little bit about where I think Guilty Gear's at and how I think especially if we're gonna do like smaller sets, bigger sets, and it kind of feels like there's like, I don't know, hallmark IPs, I guess you could say, like key IPs, which would include stuff like Godzilla and Attack on Titan, and those might be more fully fleshed out sets or more, I guess, high powered set. Which, I mean, we don't know what the hell the Godzilla set's gonna look like, if it's gonna follow a trend, but I don't know. They could have gotten the feedback in time to tone down Critical Role and Guilty Gear. I don't know how much I believe that, but you know, maybe the Attack on Titan stuff will just be the one blip, and it'll just be like MHA set one all over again, and it'll be there for like, you know what, 3 years. Like it rotates 2026, 2027 or something, whatever. And it's just everything else is gonna be cool. And every other set will give you like 3 or 4 cards to build around, you know, Critical Role. Everyone like poo-pooed it on release, right? Everyone was like, wow, this isn't that good and all these characters are bad. But then like Scanlan's Hand is a house against defensive decks. Scanlan's Hand like absolutely just trashes the average Zeke Yeager player, you know, especially like the non-life ones. Scanlan's Hand is just like, actually shut off all the card draw you bother to run. Aerial Goblin Bolt is a card people want banned and probably will until it does get banned. I think that one actually will get banned. I think Devil Jin will like show up with the equipment heist. Instead of banning heist, they'll ban Goblin Bolt and say, now you can interact with heist. Have fun interacting with heist. Harness Undeath, you know, that's a regional winner. Secret rare, right? Lightning Blast is waiting to be busted. I think Lightning Blast is in like the toxic place where like, if you can like resolve this against the Deku, it's like insane, right? Like if you can like hit them with it, it's insane. But there's a few too many decks that are not actually playing Foundations, right? But I think Lightning Blast is close. It probably needs like 2-check compensation before it'll really take off. Pristine Swordplay is having its moment in the sun. Sweeping Daggers and Animus Shot are like staples, right? Like these are like staples on their symbols, as close to having a staple as we can say. So like everyone poo-pooed Critical Role, and then it gave us like 3, 4, 5 Earthbreaker. We see you could throw Earthbreaker on that list by average card game standards. You know, 6, 7, 7, 8 cards, not to mention cards like Dark Ward that you should be playing, which responds to cards like Falling Titans. It responds to cards like Airy Smiles. So I don't know. I think people poo-pooed it on release, and maybe as time goes on, a Ninja Turtles card will get better, and that's how card games should be, right? Like we want past sets to have value and stuff, and Animus Shot was not like wholly necessary on release. So like Denver top 8 was no backup decks, right? Again, it had a bunch of Tarians. It had like what? Oh, it was a bunch of Knicks. It was 3 Knicks, 2 Tarians, Hanji, Mitchell Chimino, and of course Rodan. Yeah, so I think that's right. Someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, none of those decks I think would play a single backup. Off the top of my head, I can't imagine. I don't think we had Theo McGath yet for for Mitchell Chimino. I think it was what Justin Martin played it. That's what it was. Yeah. So like we went from like a backup list format to Animus Shop being something that people are playing like mainboarded and citing extra copies in case they run into it. So the meta evolves, players adapt, but it's really cutthroat. It's really stressful, and I'm just not gonna do that this weekend. I'm just gonna hang out. If the game isn't fun for me to play, I will find something else to do that is fun with the people that I enjoy hanging out and seeing, and hopefully I get to see and hang out with you this weekend. So thanks for listening to me rant. Hopefully you feel the same way that Guilty Gear is going to find its one way in the format. I think they're going to still have some bangers to show us this weekend in Atlanta. Hopefully the stream has some previews, and I think the secret rares are going to continue to be pretty nuts because yeah, like I said, man, I don't know. Wheeling your whole hand is something that you can definitely take for granted in UniVersus compared to other card games. But I'm just gonna build this Suzuki deck one time. All right, I'm gonna build this Suzuki deck. You can't stop me from building this Suzuki.